Hello people. Today I'm doing the Quiggin report videos that I had mentioned that I was going to be doing. The reason there's two of them is because it was so long. I wanted to split it in half so I can get my responses in as well, without it being an exceptionally long video. I hope you will watch both parts. It's kind of important because they tie in together, and there's important stuff in both parts that you really need to pay attention to. Yeah, it's this is something a lot of my subscribers have asked about, if I was going to cover the Quiggin report. Originally I wasn't going to, because so many people had covered it, and there's so many credible people, Joe Hayes, and I know for a fact one Godless woman covered it, and several other YouTubers have. But I guess to reach my audience, I felt the need to kind of do it too. So watch this report. I'm going to be putting my responses in along with it, and then we'll see how this goes. Chat soon. Bye.
Very much your talk this morning, more than you know, I think, slam back the facts and so on. So my question, to keep the time short, what strategies can non-Muslims employ to convince secular, or what's called modern Muslims, to disassociate themselves from the violence of radicalized Islam?
One of the biggest problems right now, and I see this in my work daily, and I saw it with my work when I was involved with the intelligence and law enforcement community, is that the voice, the radical voice, the voice of the Islamists, has taken control of the public agenda. And whatever you want to define them as, secular Muslims, modernist Muslims, reformist Muslims, or whatever, literally cannot get the voice of government. So just by example, we were talking earlier about Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau has met and attended conferences with a series of Islamist organizations, but he has never met with anybody from the Muslim Reform Movement, from Muslims Facing Tomorrow, from the Canadian Thinkers Association. He's never met with any of those folks. So one possible approach might be to address your Member of Parliament, your MLA, the Prime Minister directly, and say, how come you only ever meet with the Islamists? How come you don't meet with the modernists and the reformists? That wouldn't be a bad question to put to your MP and to your MLA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and your city councillor and your police chief and those kinds of folks.
Okay, so here's where I have to agree to disagree. I don't trust any practicing Muslims because they all read from the same Quran.
Again, if you look at, for instance, actually one perfect example, seeing how we're here in Toronto police force has a chaplain, an imam, who's educated at the University of Medina, advocates wife beating, advocates some of the worst aspects of Wahhabi Islam. But yet he's a chaplain for the Toronto Police Force. So more people should be questioning the Toronto Police Force and saying, why is that guy your imam? Why not somebody from one of the more modernist organizations? That would be just one approach at the civic, provincial, and federal level.
Agreed. You said a few things about the organizations that are non-radicalized Islam. Do you have any information where I could write all this down?
There's something called the Muslim Reform Movement, which operates in Canada and the United States. And much to my surprise, I was asked to join the thing last year, which is a bit ironic given that I'm sort of a recovering Irish Protestant. But nonetheless, the Muslim Reform Movement represents probably some of the most forward-thinking Muslims in North America who want to see Islam thrive and prosper as a religion, not as a political force. They want to see the faith reformed. And if historic analogies are always dangerous, but there is an Islamic reformation going on right now. This is why we see so much violence in Islamic countries. There's a struggle between the past and the present. And it's dangerous to compare it to the Protestant Reformation of 1517 and all that. But nonetheless, that's what's going on. So there's the Muslim Reform Movement is one of them. There's Muslims Facing Tomorrow is another. There's the Canadian Thinkers Forum is another one. And those are probably the three that I deal with on a regular basis on that subject matter.
And their recommendations just be to engage more with MPs?
Sorry?
Would their recommendations be to just engage more with MPs?
Most of the time, it's possible for them to get attention from some members of parliament at the local level, but at the national level, it's pretty clear, it's been put out by the government that the MPs aren't to meet with reformist Muslims. So again, I would say, you know, encourage your local MP, your MLA, your city councillor, your mayor, or whatever, to get out and start meeting with these folks on a more regular basis and see that there's at least two sides of this equation. And the folks they're dealing with, ICNA, ISNA, the Muslim Association of Canada, the National Council for Canadian Muslims, all of these organizations at the end of the day all trace back to the Muslim Brotherhood, and they're supporting what's a flat-out Islamist agenda. The Human Rights Commission in Ottawa, for instance, is trying to run an education program about making Canadians understand Muslims more. Well, guess who's running the program for them? NCCM. NCCM is, CARE Canada is what it was initially formed as. Their parent organization is a listed terrorist group. So you sort of have to ask yourself at a certain point, why is it the government of Canada and various arms of the government of Canada are dealing with the National Council for Canadian Muslims when it was founded by an organization whose parent is a listed terrorist group? It's not really something we should be doing. Better education would help all the way around.
How functional do you think an organization like CSIS is if they're getting advised by terrorist groups how to fight terrorism?
Well,
Compromise.
oh, you're trying to get me in trouble here. And being a member of the intelligence community who had a clearance that was kind of up there, I kind of have to watch what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, I think I would suggest that, for instance, and maybe here's a good example that I can talk about because it's public. The founder of CARE Canada was also the founder of CARE Ottawa, who's also the founder of CARE Montreal. Shima Khan. She founded CARE Canada and said it was founded to support CARE USA, which is a listed terrorist group in the Middle East. She went to CSIS to address them on how to do outreach to the Muslim community. And surprisingly enough, she suggests talking to CARE Canada and other like-minded groups. If that was a one-off thing, I would say that CSIS got fooled once. And, you know, hey, it can happen to anyone. But it has happened repeatedly, and CARE Canada talks to the RCMP, it talks to York Regional Police, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I look at these police forces and I've asked them, I send them emails saying, do you not know who this organization is, who the founder and what their objective is? And I never get answers from any of them. So again, that would be another good public question, is to address CSIS, to address the federal police, to address things like the York Regional Police, Peel Regional Police, et cetera, and say, why are you guys dealing with these folks? Have you looked at who their parent organization is and what their agenda is? And then go from there.
Do you have any thoughts about, do you have any thoughts about when the government says Islam isn't violent, it is only this, it seems to imply that Islam is sort of defined by Canadian law and not by its own text. So
yeah,
there's a theological statement about something that seems to be.
Yeah, there's the first problem is Islam. Islam is this or Islam is that. Well, there's no such thing as Islam in the sense that there is no single coherent body referred to as Islam anymore. There is a single coherent body called Christianity. So there's the first kind of issue, is there is no Islam is this or Islam is that. So the question becomes, though, it's fair to ask, some people say Islam means peace. But another group of people say, no, it translates Islam is submission.
So any religion that advocates the use of the word infidel or female genital mutilation is not peaceful, okay? And it oppresses women and children with the use of burqas and hijabs and wife beating, etc. I see no moderacy in these doings. I mean, how can you call that moderate, right? I've struggled with the whole thing of Islam simply because their Bible tells them to fool and deceive us, and I'll be getting to that in a bit.
Which is what you'll see on Yonge Street in Toronto, up on the walls of the mosque there. Here's another way of looking at the issue. There are, broadly speaking, two intellectual trends within Islam right now. One is what one might call the Meccan tradition, the tradition of Islam as it was expressed through the writings of the Quran and Hadith when the Prophet was in Mecca. And it believes that Islam is peace, it believes in reconciliation, it believes in recognizing the peoples of the book, i.e. the Jews and the Christians, etc., etc. And there's a series of rules and regulations. When you look at it, you go, yeah, that could be okay. I could live with those guys as my neighborhood. However, within the Quran, there's another tradition, which is the Medina tradition. When the Prophet goes to Medina, when he's driven out of Mecca and then he fights his way back in, that tradition is incredibly violent. Islam means submission. You must kill the infidel. You must kill apostates. You must kill, kill, kill. And that tradition of Islam is the one that is in ascendance right now. It is the voice we see in Ottawa. It's the voice we see in Toronto. It's the voice we see in London, Paris, Berlin. That is the voice that's in ascendance right now, and it is the one that is truly dangerous. So does Islam mean peace? Does Islam mean submission? Well, it means both, depending who's doing the translation for you. Canada and other Western countries should be looking at those Muslims who are advocating Islam as a peaceful religion for the future and getting behind them and helping them. And it should be working against the Medina tradition or the Islamist or the Muslim Brotherhood and saying, we don't want you guys. Ironically enough, almost here in Canada, we're almost going the exact opposite direction. What I get from Muslims when I talk to like Muslims from Egypt or Lebanon or whatever, they tell me, they say one of their biggest problems are the Western governments, who should be interfering in this, who should be taking a lead in supporting modern Islam rather than supporting ancient Islam. But anyway, sir.
So if all this is so evident, that all these different racist things that the Muslim Brotherhood does, and all these radical preachers, like the one that was downtown, where's the police force? Where's the chief of Toronto Police? Where's the RCMP? Where's the OPP? How can these people be in charge?
Okay, let me just give you one sort of example of some of the things I've run into with police forces. Forced suicides or honor killing of young girls amongst brown females in Canada is probably highest here in Ontario, second highest in British Columbia, but the rate here in Ontario is probably the highest of suicides amongst brown Muslim females in the world. So that includes, you know, India, Pakistan, where there's high degree of Muslim population. So it's a known problem that girls are being murdered or forced to commit suicide in their own household. And right now, the drug of choice is warfarin, blood thinner. The police know this, Peel Regional, Toronto, whatever. I've talked to them, and they tell me something really fascinating. They say they know what's going on, and they're working on it. But getting into the community is very hard because you can't get witnesses, no one wants to talk. Even if you talk to the sister of a girl who's been murdered, essentially, or forced to commit suicide, you can only meet her off-site, you can't meet her in uniform, and she's terrified. If somebody sees her talking to an outsider, that'll get back to her father, her uncle. So here's the thrust of the matter. When I talk to the police at the front end level, and I worked for the RCMP for 6 years, and I've worked with a variety of police forces, these guys and these gals tell me that when they go to their supervisors at the inspector level or the superintendent level and say, we need more resources, we need to get out into the community, they get told, yes, you're right, we need to do this. And that layer of management in most police forces is still white, male, and mostly Christian. But they have no problem going after it. Where it dies and where they get no support is at the chief level and at the police board level. When it gets promoted to that level, it dies because, oh, well, we can't touch that. That's cultural. We can't touch that. That's religious.
So this is our problem with fighting the Islamic invasion, is that they have infiltrated our police hierarchy, and the smaller, lower end police can't really get much done. And our federal government, to use the excuse of religion and racism to quell any opposition to what they're saying. We need to drain all the swamps. I mean, we need to drain the police, we need to drain the CSIS, we need to drain the government for sure. We have so many swamps here to drain. We're going to need every Canadian on board to do it. That's my thought.
The politicians have got the chiefs of police so terrified, they didn't even talk about this stuff. Chief Mortillo in Ottawa, when he was asked about all the shootings occurring in Ottawa right now, said he had no idea what was causing the increase in shootings. And everybody just kind of like, okay, you know.
So let's say that the chief of police, I understand that where the girls are scared skinny and they won't talk about their sister being murdered. But the other ones in regards to, let's just take the mosque downtown where they have a videotape of the Iman saying kill the Jews and the infidels. I mean, hard evidence. Tory talked about that mosque because he thought picketed, right? And the chief talked about the boss about the picketers, but the day later this video surfaced. I didn't hear from Tori. I didn't hear from the chief. I didn't see anybody getting charged.
No, in fact, if you look closely, you would see Kathleen Wynne sitting at the back of the mosque, barefoot with her head covered, waiting till after the men speak. So my suggestion to you would be the power of political correctness, the power of Islamophobia is so powerful that even when senior leaders are presented with clear evidence, they will still find ways to reject it, to justify it, whatever.
So this is proof of the Islamic invasion. It's aided by government, who will deflect any opposition with the excuses and politically correct bullshit. I mean, how can you fight that when they're fighting political correctness with political correctness, right?
Just as an aside, I spent 1.5 years in Singapore working on an intelligence project on exactly this issue. How do you get senior leaders, chiefs of police, ministers, prime ministers, premiers, to listen to intelligence when it runs directly contrary to their dearly held beliefs? And I will suggest to you the power of political correctness is so powerful, and it is so entrenched in Canada, that you can literally show them physical evidence and they will find a way to ignore it, to justify it, to accept it, or to explain away why it's too difficult, or to say, well, that's a problem, we have a bigger problem down the road. So they're weak. People will get killed. I mean, a lot of people came to me after the Parliament was shot up and said, you know, members of Parliament were part of a terrorist attack. This is going to really rattle them. And the day after that, I said, no, it won't. They won't change a bit. They'll put better security on Parliament Hill, and that's all they're going to do. And by the way, that's all they've done. Shooting at them will not change their attitude. It's going to take a catastrophe of major proportions in order to undo that.
So how do we, what kind of a campaign could we put together to get them to change their mind?
Education and exposure.
Which is what I've been saying all along. Education and exposure to this corrupted government is the most effective tool to fight back. It will wake up more people to the Islamic deception. You know, that's my thought.
The first thing, I mean, one of the things I do is research heavily onto who the groups are, what properties they own, how much money they have, which parties they donate to, who are the entryists that they're dropping into the political campaigns and stuff like that. So that's part of it, and that's part of what this meeting was today, of course, is this broader effort at education. The second thing is politicians only listen to two things. They don't care about anything except money and votes. That's all politicians care about. You can talk to them about death, destruction, murder, rape, pestilence, plagues of locusts, rivers running with blood. They'll hear nothing. Mention the word money and vote, and their head pivots and looks at you directly. It has to be expressed to the politicians that if they want to hang out with Iqra Khalid, if they want to hang out with the Dundas Street Mosque, that's fine. We're going to vote against you, and we're going to donate money to the other guy. So I think one of the things that has to be done is to repeatedly demonstrate to the politicians that most Canadians don't have a problem with Islam. They don't have a problem with Muslims. They do have a problem with the Islamists, and they do have a problem with extremism, and they do have a problem with Islamophobia. So the message to the politicians have to be, if you want to hang out with these guys, fine, but we're not going to vote for you next time.
Okay, this is the end of part one. Before I get into part two, I just want to say that this is not about hate. This is not about hating Muslims. I mean, like I say, we've had them here in Canada probably my whole lifetime, and we've always gotten along. It's just recently with these Wahhabi political Islamists coming in that are really causing the bigger problems because they have infiltrated our governments and police, as I said. So it's hard to kind of fight it when you've got the law and the government working against you in favor of the corrupted. So this is what we're facing. I hope you'll watch part two. It's very important that you do to catch the other important issues that Tom talks about and I talk about as well. So hope to see you in part two.